Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. This show is being produced in Portland, Oregon. And for you first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. Tonight we're going to be talking about universal health care, and we'll bring you up to speed on what's going on, and we'll certainly be talking about the 50th birthday of Medicare. And my guests have been on this show a number of times in the past because they're so deucedly interesting personally and because of the stuff they're working on, which goes right down my alley. And I'm a little less nervous than I usually am because we've talked before, and I know you're really nice and you won't beat me up. And how are you, Samuel Metz, Dr. Metz?
Thank you very much for having me and Steve on today.
It's always a delight to have you. And Steve, my fellow socialist, Steve Weiss. How are you, Steve?
I'm okay, sort of.
Mm-hmm. So shall I put my shrink hat on and figure out what's going on? Never mind. Are you okay?
Well, there's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. And it's disturbing.
Yeah. And the two of you, I couldn't think of two better people to talk about the stuff going on out there that we need to have out there for the regular viewers to learn about, because we've got to keep the battle going, keep struggling, right? So as you know, the show goes in two major parts. The first is the bio part where we talk about who you are a little bit. And even though you've done this a number of times in the past, there are people who will see this show who have not seen the earlier shows. Maybe we won't go as long as we have in the past, but let's cover a little about who you are personally so people will know where you're coming from when you're voicing your opinion about Medicare and those kinds of things. And then we have a series of nice questions that Sam here, can I call you Sam?
Only my mother is allowed to call me doctor, and she covets that because she paid for it. Sam is just fine, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Steve?
Of course. We've known each other a long time.
A long time. It's been
about 15 years, I think.
We don't talk often enough, but it's always a joy to be with you.
Same here.
So I got these nice questions to help me quiz you about what we're talking about in Medicare. So let's start off with the who you are. Who shall I start with to probe and to quiz?
No, start with Sam.
I was about to volunteer Steve, so that's quite.
So, and when and where were you born?
Well, I was born longer ago than I care to admit to, but after you. I'm a physician. I'm an anesthesiologist in Portland. I've been living in Portland since 2004. I've been active in healthcare reform in Oregon since 2009. Actually introduced it. My first meeting was Physicians for a National Health Program, and Steve was there. He's been doing this longer than I have. Mm-hmm. I'm motivated by all of the stories that I hear from friends and family, all of whom are just being run over with thundering hooves, worrying about healthcare. You know, there's not a family in the United States that goes to bed knowing that if they get into trouble the next day, they're going to get the care they need. We used to think that that's just the way it has to be. But in fact, we're the only developed country that has that concern. We are head and shoulders above all other countries when it comes to healthcare insecurity.
Yes.
That's what I've been working on, trying to remedy that here in Oregon.
Are you still practicing?
I am. I practice anesthesia during the day, and then I save the world at night. And try to be a good husband and a good father in between.
And I'm sure you do a fine job.
Yeah, thank you. My 16-year-old son might occasionally differ on that, but yes.
What does he know? Never. And you are equally concerned about what Sam is talking about.
Yes.
Any particular thought and a brief summary right now that you're concerned about with what's happening to our healthcare system in America?
The dark side is in control of the Congress of the United States. I love using Harry Potter terminology here because it really does fit. And they've got about 1.5 years left in controlling Congress, and I think they're going to try to do a lot of terrible things, including trying to scuttle the agreement that the Obama administration has come to with Iran, an agreement I support. And so but that's just one thing. I mean, I think they're crazy. I mean, I think the Republican Party's been taken over by extremists. They're sociopathic, and it's scary.
Once again, you sugarcoat it, Steve. You can just spit out how you feel.
But let me talk about myself. I've been a volunteer advocate here in Portland for 20 years now. And it's a career. And it's been the third act of my life and the best act by far
Really?
of the 3 acts of my life. The walls of my living room and dining room are lined with awards and certificates of appreciation for the work that I've done, and makes me feel like I'm actually accomplishing something. I'm currently board president of 4 nonprofit organizations.
4?
They are the Oregon State Council for Retired Citizens. The OSCRC is the only senior organization in the state that endorses political candidates. We have our own political action committee, and I'm president of that too. I'm board president of Independent Living Resources. ILR is the largest center for independent living for people with disabilities in Oregon. I'm board president of the Community Alliance of Tenants. CAT is the tenants' rights organization in Oregon. And I'm board president of the Oregon Consumer League, which is, I think, going to become a major player in consumer advocacy in the state of Oregon within the next 2 years, I predict.
When do you sleep?
It doesn't take up as much time as it sounds like it does. I have other organizational affiliations too. I'm just mentioning the 4 that I'm board president of.
From the past, I remember you've got another dozen or so.
I do. But one of the ones I'm proudest of is that I'm a 31-year member of Democratic Socialists of America.
Yes.
You are a long-term member.
Yes.
For me, DSA is the socialist organization in this country. It doesn't have a whole lot of members these days, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people. But as Spencer Tracy once said of Katharine Hepburn in Pat and Mike, there isn't much there, but what's there is churse.
Let's go back to Sam for a bit. We talked about when and where you were born, and anything significant about your cultural heritage that's worth mentioning for the viewers?
There is the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, Hebrew for fixing the world. Now, sometimes that comes out of just plain guilt, but a lot of us convert that energy into leaving the world better than we found it. And that provides a lot of energy for me and other members of my family who have similarly campaigned for people who can't campaign for themselves.
And it's been that way all your life?
Started out as guilt, but yes, now it's tikkun olam.
Listen, I'll quarrel with you about guilt. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I know about guilt. We'll compare. Steve, you know about guilt?
Yes. Yes. Each religion has its own form of guilt, which makes it interesting. I am a secular Jew. I used to think that only Judaism had a secular branch to it, but it's not quite true. When I read Michael Harrington's book, The Politics of God's Funeral,
Socialist?
which he, yes, and the founder of Democratic Socialism,
yes.
He had left the Catholic Church some years before he wrote that book. He'd worked originally with Dorothy Day, with the Catholic worker movement. And he said he considered himself a cultural Catholic. I thought only those of us who were secular Jews consider ourselves cultural Jews. I didn't think they did that in any other religion. I don't know how many people are like Michael Harrington in that respect, but I have a feeling that each of the major religions probably has within it a secular group that identifies that way.
Yeah. You're a-religious now?
I classify myself as an agnostic leaning toward atheism.
Sam, are you religious or are you a practicing Jew?
I am non-observant. It's like Steve. It's part of my culture. I can't shed it. It's who I am. I carry it with me whether I observe or not.
Yeah. And there's something valuable and useful for the spirit or the soul or the heart. Those kinds of things we were brought up with in those tender, formative years. And I occasionally I'll go to some big city where there's a big cathedral and find a reason to go in and just stand there for a few moments and experience something. I don't know what it is, but I still do it, and yet I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. So there's something, I'm digressing too much here.
Yeah.
And we know what you do, and we know what you're doing now, and you talk about, you have a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend?
I did. But the woman who was the love of my life took her own life a year and a half ago.
A year and a half? Oh my gosh, Steve.
I haven't been the same since.
Okay. Maybe we can chat a little bit about that later on. That's my business, you know.
Okay.
And I like you anyhow. And you mentioned your family and your son.
My 16-year-old son is just out there outside the studio wearing his Doctor Who t-shirt that I should be wearing. It says, "Keep calm, I'm the doctor."
Okay, and we know your political persuasion. You're both very conservative Tea Party members, are you? Never mind.
Strictly coffee.
Memberships, and we talked about your memberships, and you are active in physicians' organizations.
Physicians for a National Health Program, PNHP. Has about 16,000 members, most of whom are physicians who, as you could guess, advocate for universal health care. The national office on a national level. There are several Oregon chapters, all of whom are working on statewide universal care, which is a little bit more likely than national universal care. It's sort of like we'll get a universal health care plan nationally about the same time we have an all-Chicago World Series. However,
but you don't stop fighting.
Statewide, it's about the same chances as the Ducks winning the Rose Bowl. Not this year, but just wait. Year, 2 years, we'll get there.
All right. Persons from the past or alive today, any names come to mind that you particularly admire or look up to? So get an idea where you're coming from.
I just learned about a Jewish scholar, Rabbi Abraham Heschel.
Oh, yes.
A refugee from Nazi Europe, came to the United States. Not only did he literally march with Martin Luther King in Selma,
Yeah.
got the photographs, He articulated the protest against the Vietnam War convincingly and respectfully. He also represented American Judaism to the Vatican when Pope Paul VI came out with our statement in the early 60s, which reversed about 1,800 years of Catholic dogma that held the entire Jewish nation of today responsible for the death of Jesus.
Yes.
A remarkable man who wrote remarkably well, profoundly well, who represented the best interest not just of Judaism but of anyone with a moral core.
Yeah. Okay. What do you got for me, Steve, as somebody you look up and admire to, other than me?
No. Well, I think you know from past programs that I'm a great admirer of Noam Chomsky.
Oh,
he is still with us, I'm happy to say, pushing 90, I guess, at this point, and still writing with great lucidity on the United States and who and what we really are, which is not very easy for people to take. But it's true, and it's painful, and that's one of the reasons he's not read by that many people. The truth often hurts very much.
Yeah.
One of the people I admire, who I've never mentioned before, is the late Dr. Robert Butler, who was one of this country's most distinguished gerontologists. Mm-hmm. Recently, Dr. Butler's daughter wrote a piece about him for the New York Times about both Dr. Butler and Dr. Butler's wife. Were an extraordinary twosome, very close, and wrote path-breaking books on growing older, sexuality in later years, and on varying subjects. In his last years, after his wife died, that was probably the worst thing that happened to Dr. Butler. He was deeply affected by that. But everything he wrote and said afterward had even more wisdom to it. It was like, the personal tragedy of losing the love of his life actually made him a wiser, if sadder man. And when he died, it was a major loss for those of us who do elder advocacy. So I want to give my own salute to Dr. Butler. He influenced me a lot, and I miss him. I don't know that we'll see his like again.
Mm-hmm. Elders, any reason you have this involvement with old people?
Because I'm 72.
I know what the answer was.
So, but also because I want progressive elders to be out in front on things. Don, the only age group that would put John McCain in the White House in what?
2008.
2008. And Mitt Romney in the White House in I forget which year, with a 65 and older group. And I'd sure like to change that. It may take a long time to change it, but it's kind of sad that my generation is so deluded about who the best political candidates are.
Yeah. A couple more questions before we take a break, and then we'll get into the meat of our discussion this evening. What's wrong with America? Just give me one or two examples, and what's right with America?
What's right with America is it has a great deal of respect for individuals. We don't function well as a community, but there's a lot of energy that has done great things in the past and can do great things in the future. We were an exceptional country. We'll become an exceptional country again. Right now, we don't look so good. We have the lowest tax burden of any developed country. Mm-hmm. We pay for that because we have the lowest level of social services, that is schools, parks, museums, hospitals, libraries, roads. We have the highest rate of income inequality in the country, in the developed world.
Yes.
It's also increasing faster than anywhere else. We have more children in poverty than any other developed country. Children born in poverty in the U.S. are less likely to get out of poverty than children anywhere else. We incarcerate a greater percent of our population than any other country in the world, including China, Iran, any other country. Our educational achievement is dropping into the bottom half of the developed world. Our healthcare is the most expensive in the world, and our public health is the worst in the developed world.
That's a heck of a thing you're saying there.
We're in a bad spot now. We need to think more about ourselves as part of a family rather than as fighting over a few leavings. We hear people talk about running government like a business. That's not the right analogy. We should run government like a family.
Okay.
When your family's in trouble, you don't outsource your children, you don't sell your spouse, you don't tell your destitute relatives that they're on their own. You go out and you do what needs to be done, and you sacrifice, and you put your family back together.
So that's what's wrong and what's right. And we're looking in the future and having some of those things, or all of those things, reverse our direction that we're heading. Steve, what do you got to say to that question? What's wrong or what's right with America, briefly?
Recent Gallup polls indicate that the United States, the U.S. public is becoming much more tolerant of different lifestyles. The Supreme Court decision on GLBT marriage and the polling data on premarital sex and a lot of other social issues is looking remarkably good in comparison to 10 years ago. There have been major changes. So that's good. What's bad is that polling data is being upped by younger folks and people of color. And the folks who are the most reactionary and right-wing in America now are white people. And I think that the coloring of America is probably one of the best things happening to this country, precisely because it's enabling changes that we've needed to happen for a long time. Think about intermarriage and its history in the last 50 years, Don, and where we've come to, where there are now millions of interracial couples in America. And doing that, for instance, in the late 1940s, was a major trauma for any couple that tried to do it. That change in itself has been remarkable, but it's probably not all that surprising. It was predicted by a number of folks for years, and it's making us a better country.
Wow. What am I going to do with you two guys? I got nothing to contribute to what you just said in response to my question. Let's take a break and come back and talk about the substance. Okay, Mr. E? Can we have a break? Yeah. So okay, looks like we are back, and I want to say thank you for not running away during the break, but I want to say something to the viewers who didn't see the opening of the show. You're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and whatever else we've decided to talk about. We're going to talk about Medicare, Medicare's birthday, and related things. And we have two outstanding guests here, Dr. Sam Metz and Steve Weiss, longtime guest from the past. And you're going to be on again in the future, too. So let's get into the meat of this thing now. And I think at break time you suggested that Steve would start off talking about Medicare, Medicaid. And then I've got some questions I will ask you as you run out of steam.
So July 30th will be the 50th anniversary of the enactment of both Medicare and Medicaid. There are currently an estimated 52 million people on Medicare and an estimated 70 million people on Medicaid. That Medicaid number is due to the Medicaid expansion that is part of the Affordable Care Act. So we actually have more than 1/3 of the population of the United States on one or both of those programs. And when I say both, if you're a dual eligible like me, Medicare is your primary health care, Medicaid is your secondary health care. So some of us, about 9 million of us nationally, dual eligibles, are actually on both programs. So we are having an anniversary celebration for Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Social Security's 80th anniversary is August 14th. So we're putting them all together. On Thursday, July 30th from noon to 2 p.m. at Terry Shrunk Plaza in downtown Portland. And
it's up there.
Oh, it's up there. Great. And so it's free, and we'll have speakers and music and light refreshments. And we want as many people to come as possible. And we will have speakers probably around 12:15. Senator Michael Dembrow will be there. Sam Metz will be speaking, I will be speaking, and we're trying to arrange for some more speakers even at this late date, and hopefully we will have more.
Can I come?
Absolutely.
Well, that sounds wonderful.
Now, quickly, all three programs are being threatened by what I like to call the dark side, the Republicans that are controlling Congress. They want to voucherize Medicare, block grant Medicaid, and raise the eligibility age of Social Security to 70 and prevent the Social Security Trust Fund from shoring up the Social Security Disability Insurance Fund, something that the Social Security Trust Fund has done several times in the past without any ill effects whatsoever. But the Republicans are after Social Security Disability Insurance. They're raising the old canard that people are gaming the system, and it's just not true. Disability fraud is very, very low. This is just the Republicans' hatred of all social safety net programs. I mean, they've been wanting to abolish the social safety net for a long time, beginning with Social Security in the 1930s and going right up to the social safety net programs we have today.
Will they have any success?
I fear for those programs. The current Congress will be in session for another year and a half. We don't know what the Republicans are capable of passing in Congress, and if President Obama vetoes what they pass, we don't know for certain whether the Republicans can override a presidential veto on any particular issue that they've managed to pass. All of those are unknowns at this point in time.
Why is it this situation that you're describing exists right now? The Republicans, as you call them, their behavior, and they seem to be blocking all efforts at social responsibility.
Two reasons. First, they've been taken over by an extremist wing of the party, an extreme right wing of the party, Tea Partiers with other nuts and screwballs. Secondly, we have a deluded electorate. I mean, there was simply no good reason for the Republicans to make the gains that they did in the last election. And so the combination of those two things, I think more than anything else, is the reason why the Republicans are now in control of both parts of Congress.
That's a pretty powerful statement, a deluded public.
Yes.
How'd that come about?
I think the Republicans have learned a great deal about public relations over the last 20 years. And they've used public relations firms headed by pollsters like Frank Luntz to craft strategies that have been highly successful. So successful that James Cameron and his Tories in England have been in contact with Republican strategists here and utilizing their strategy to do things like eviscerate England's National Health Service, which the Tories have been wanting to do for a long time. For a long time, the NHS has been untouchable. It is not untouchable anymore. Cameron has enough chutzpah for 10 people. And so
Goebbels still speaks, or was there someone before Goebbels who managed to convince the powers that be to convince ordinary people to vote against their best interest?
I think it was Hitler in Mein Kampf who said, the bigger the lie, the more easily it will be believed. And unfortunately, there's much too much truth to that for comfort.
Sam, you want to add something here? I saw you gather your breath for a moment. When Steve gets going, man, it's hard to...
Focusing on healthcare.
Yes.
It is such a hideously complex yet vital topic that people become desperate. We have so much insecurity about whether our family is going to live or die that people want solutions. But when you've got a complex problem, there are no simple solutions. People grasp at bumper sticker solutions, at sound bites, because it's all they can understand in healthcare.
Why is it so complex?
It doesn't have to be,
Yes.
but it is. It's different from other parts of the economy. This is not a supply and demand kind of interaction. As the costs of healthcare go up, the need for healthcare doesn't change. When we have more providers, when we have more insurance companies, when they compete, the prices go up, not down. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, not wishing to cloud this too much, treats healthcare like a commodity, especially drugs. Now, it's one thing if you don't get the widescreen television that you want, or you don't get the new car that you want. As long as this agreement makes money for the people who make money in international trade, we think that's okay. But if you don't get the drugs you need, if your family doesn't get the drugs they need, they die. Healthcare is not a commodity. Our civilization will dissolve if people don't get the healthcare they need. Around the world, around the developed world, every one of them provides better care to more people for less money than we do. Every one of them, without exception.
Better than what we provide in America.
We have the world's most expensive healthcare system by a factor of 2. We're way ahead of who's ever in second place, Switzerland and Norway. Yet our public health measures are terrible. Maternal mortality. There are 60 other countries where a pregnant woman and her baby have a better chance of surviving the pregnancy, including Saudi Arabia.
Just the other day, I dug out T.R. Reid's book and started doing it again for the 3rd or 4th time in anticipation of the time in the near future when we get together again. What a great researcher he was.
For the viewers out there,
yes.
T.R. Reid, R-E-I-D, wrote The Healing of America in 2009. It is absolutely the best, most readable, most entertaining introduction to why American healthcare is so different from the rest of the world. It doesn't have to be. Healthcare, medical debt is responsible for most personal bankruptcies in the United States. And most of those families who went bankrupt started out with health insurance. Now, medical bankruptcy is an American disease. It will not happen in other developed countries. You will not go broke. You will not lose your home trying to pay for your family's health care in any other country but here. It's also the most common cause of labor management disputes. You will not find a strike over health care benefits against any company in the developed world except American companies. We lose sight of what the goal of healthcare reform is. For some people, it's about smashing the corporate plutocracy, getting the profits out of healthcare, getting the profits into healthcare, bigger government, smaller government. That's not what healthcare reform is about. It's about better care to more people for less money. If we focus on that goal, we'll be able to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Well, supposedly the administration is doing that, and yet the insurance companies are still involved in the process. Is that possible to have a successful plan, a program for the average citizen that doesn't include the insurance companies?
It's conceivable of achieving better care to more people for less money using the American private healthcare insurance system. No one's ever done it in recorded history. Maybe Neanderthals did it and they just didn't have time to chisel it on a cave somewhere. But if we ever do that, we will be the first ever. When we look around the world at every country that's providing better care to more people for less money, none of them are using the American private health insurance model. There's a lesson there. You know, if we want to solve this problem, we can go one of three routes. Either we can keep doing what we've been doing for 60 years and hope for a different result. That's the Affordable Care Act. We can either try things in medicine that have never been shown to work anywhere else or in our country, vouchers, for example. There's no working model of vouchers providing better care to more people for less money. Or we can look at the systems that already provide better care to more people for less money and see what they have to teach us.
And there are some.
Every other country in the world is already providing better care to more people for less money. They're all different, by the way.
Of course.
In spite of what we hear on talk show radio, it's not all socialized medicine. And in fact, most of these countries don't use socialized medicine. They all are different. But what they have in common is the theme of T.R. Reid's book, The Healing of America. They all start with universal care. Universal care is not a goal. It's the first single most critical step in getting better care to more people for less money. If we want better care for more people for less money, the one lesson we can learn from the systems that already do it is you start from the notion of universal care and build up from that. No one's ever done it without starting with universal care. That's the lesson for us. Universal care. Medicare is the only national universal care system in the U.S. Well, not quite true. We have the veterans. We have TRICARE for military. These are all universal care systems that allow everybody gets equal access. All physicians are paid the same for the same services, no matter who their patients are. And all of these systems provide better care than American private health insurance companies for less money.
Help me out here. I can't figure out how we're in this situation we're in today with medical care for our ordinary citizens. And there are 60 minutes segments and occasional on PBS programs that talk about the kind of things that we're talking about right here and now. And yet, I think many of the people watch these programs and have this information about how unfair the existing system is, and yet they don't bounce to people in government who can do something about this. They still vote for them. Why is that? Why are people voting or supporting people who are not in favor of the universal health care we're talking about?
Steve mentioned one of the factors, and I'd like to run with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know if you do a poll and ask people, what do you think of the Affordable Care Act? The best way to guess what somebody's going to respond is not their age, their state of health, whether they have insurance, how much money they have. It's their political party. The Affordable Care Act is 500,000 words. It's longer than Moby Dick. I don't know if anybody who's read Moby Dick all the way through, and nobody has read the Affordable Care Act through. Nobody understands it. But if you want the Affordable Care Act to become politicized, it has nothing to do with health care. It has to do with the legacy of Barack Obama. And that's how you know what people think. This discussion of healthcare reform has been hijacked by people who want to use healthcare reform for something other than better care to more people for less money.
Yeah.
They're trying to advance a political agenda, and the consequences to people's healthcare are immaterial.
What is that political agenda?
Oh, everyone is using it. It doesn't matter where on the political spectrum you are.
And what is
You're going to find somebody who's going to want healthcare reform to answer their agenda, and I mentioned a few of them. If you are upset at the how corporations have taken over the United States, well, you want to use healthcare as a weapon to fight the corporations. If you don't think there's enough privatization in healthcare, if you think the government needs to do less, you're going to use healthcare reform to advance that. And in all of these vast struggles, the ones who get trampled underfoot are people who just want to make sure that their family gets the healthcare that they need without going broke.
Do healthcare reform, or do you need something stronger than that? Reform means we're going to do something with the existing system and make it better, or we need to chuck the system out totally and have something fresh, like what goes on in other countries in the world.
You know, I think there are some basic principles that work here, at least there are for me.
Okay.
First, I think, is that healthcare is a human right. But the truth is, I believe housing is a human right, and freedom from hunger is also a human right. And President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came pretty much close to saying that in his January 1944 State of the Union address, which you can kind of see in Michael Moore's documentary, Capitalism: A Love Story. He dug up the footage of that. I cried when I watched that, and I don't cry easily at political speeches. So, I mean, in other words, we have some precedent here for such things, but these concepts have not taken hold. I think the Republicans have been extremely clever in using divide and conquer strategies with the American public and pitting groups against each other. You know, Social Security has been untouchable because everybody's affected by it. But if you get social safety net programs that are only for a segment of the American public, those programs can always be stigmatized by conservatives. And they've done that very effectively. So if you can divide people enough and divide opinion enough, you can divide and conquer. And unfortunately, the dark side has been very effective at that.
I'm going to part ways a bit here.
Sure.
Steve mentioned healthcare as a human right. That stops the conversation. It's a diagnostic maneuver. It's not therapeutic. When I ask someone, do you think healthcare is a human right? Their answer is, what am I buying here? If I accept healthcare as a human right, does that mean I pay more for healthcare? Does that mean I'm paying more for other people to get the health care that my family isn't getting? Does this mean the cost of living has gone up? Does this mean there will be jobs lost? The debate can't be on a moral level, as much as we feel like everyone should get the health care they need. The debate, if it's going to be won politically, needs to be won on a family level. If you want your family to be assured of getting the health care they need without you paying more money, let's talk about ways to do that. And you know, most people's morality are driven by what they think their family's best financial interests are. People who have a conflict there usually end up in monasteries. But if you can convince me that it's my family's best financial interest and my family's health security would be advanced by one particular proposal, my morality will allow me to accept it. That's how we need to sell universal care. Not because it's the right thing for somebody else, but because it's the right thing for you and your family and your children and your friends. And you know, it is. That's the part we need to sell.
You used the magic word here a couple of times when you said financial and financial. And if we look real close, then Americans are conditioned to have financial be the number one motivation or consideration in the decisions that they make. And particularly the ruling elite, the super rich, they need to keep making more money and more profits, and they never get enough, and they got to get it from someplace. And that means any place they can, including, someone suggested the other day to me that America is starting a slide on the austerity continuum like Greece and other countries in Europe right now, because the super rich never get enough, and if they can't pillage the rest of the world, the rest of humanity, they're turning on the American citizens. That means nothing to them. They're super rich. There is go ahead.
The slide into healthcare oblivion is not being driven primarily by the very wealthy. It's being driven by people at the other end of the spectrum who don't understand what's in their best interest. And in a way, it's our failure. Our meaning, we healthcare reform advocates. We have not put healthcare reform into terms that are understandable to frightened, financially insecure people who are worried about their family. And we can do that. We can, if we keep the conversation focused on the family, healthcare security, reducing your healthcare costs, there are very few people who will vote against that. If the conversation is about jobs or philosophy, is this a left-wing plan or a right-wing plan? Is this conservative or progressive, Democratic, Republican? Who's going to make money? Once the conversation stumbles in that direction, then, as you've intimated, the party or the interest group with the most money will win. But if we keep it focused on you, your family's health, then we win.
Money again. Somehow money, financial, seems to creep into your comments and your consideration here. This is my argument.
There are very few people who abandon their morality in favor of mine. I've never won a moral argument and somebody's slapped their forehead and said, you know, you're absolutely right, and I've been wrong for my entire life. I see the right moral way. It doesn't happen very often. But I do a lot of talking about healthcare reform to business groups, to church groups, to classrooms, to community groups.
Yes.
When I frame this discussion about what concerns these people in this audience, which is their family and their health, they grasp it. They see it. They understand it. There's untapped enthusiasm for universal care if we talk about their family, and what's right for their family is usually best understood in terms of money. Nobody is going to take care of their family if it means they go broke. In this case, talking about money is a tool to get people to do the right thing, rather than saying, if you do the right thing, maybe you'll make money or not. It doesn't matter why people do the right thing. And if we can make it easy for them, that's what we should do.
And the right thing is caring for fellow citizens, fellow humans?
Universal care. Now, in any political movement, there are immediate winners, immediate losers. But if you look 5 or 10 years down the line, everybody benefits from universal care.
Of course.
Even the very wealthy who may find themselves paying more money. What they've gotten in exchange for their money is security for their families, even if they stop being wealthy. They've got health care security for their family, even if their family doesn't have money.
Human motivation is interesting. There are motivations that we have that we are aware of as individuals, and then there are motivations that we have that we're not aware of. We've been conditioned to have another motivation. And fairly often, a person will behave in a way and they look back and say, what did I do that for? Because they had a motivation that they were following that they weren't even aware of. And I'm talking about I'm grinding my axe here, Sam. The motivation to have more money and to have more power and to be like those people who are getting richer and richer. And it involves money, and so morality then it plays second fiddle. I want to have it so citizens are better off and have medical care, but I got to be sure and make money. So I better vote for people who are going to let me make money, and then the other will follow. And then I'm going to rest my case.
So
Yes,
let me say something. I confess that I have a tendency to think of things in moral and ethical terms. Mm-hmm. So at the risk of oversimplification, I'm going to posit two attitudes that I think are both simple, maybe deceptively simple, that prevail in society. The first one was articulated by the late actor Charlton Heston, who in an interview with TV Guide said, "I think I grew up on the day I realized if it happened to you, it's your fault." And the other polar opposite view, and I don't know who said it first, was the view that says, "There but for fortune go you and I." Those two views, if it happened to you, it's your fault, and "there but for fortune go you and I," are separate universes. They imply all sorts of views and opinions on what constitutes a good and just society. Now, I, not surprisingly, and I think your viewers can guess this by now, identify with the "there but for fortune go you and I," which is also the title of a wonderful song by the late Phil Oakes. And am very much opposed to the view that if it happened to you, it's your fault. Now, we can have interesting philosophical and psychological discussions on both concepts, but I do think that they're a convenient way of showing the differences for those on the left of the political spectrum and those on the right of the political spectrum, because I think really those views represent both parts of those spectrums.
The question then is, how can you get both of these philosophies?
We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, so we're going to need to...
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you get them both to agree? I don't think we're going to convince the people who believe what Charlton Heston believes are going to change their minds, no matter what I say. Our goal is to get universal care accepted as the right thing to do by both camps, and we can do that.
Yes.
And my point of view is people do change depending on economic conditions. There were immediate changes in people's views during the Depression of the 1930s. It may be that we're going to need things to get a lot worse in this country before people start recognizing their own humanity again and the brotherhood and sisterhood of the human race. And we saw some of it happen during the Depression. We saw changes occur as a result of the Depression. I see a bad moon rising in this country, and we may have to confront something like that again.
Sam, what do you got to say with what he just said?
Universal care works for families,
Yeah.
whether you believe it's every man for himself or we all pull together. We're never going to sell universal care as morally the right thing to do, no matter what we think. But we can sell universal care as good for every family in the United States. And if we extract it from that debate of whether it's the right thing to do morally and just do what's right for your family, we'll get it.
I will stop and take a half a minute or so to have some closing thoughts or comments about anything at all for the viewers. Camera too.
Well, first, your mention that we're often motivated by things that we're unaware of. That's the working title of my as yet unwritten autobiography. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
When are you going to finish it?
I think when people think about their families and what's the right thing for their families, we'll get universal care.
Okay. Steve?
My late partner, Marta Russell, was a nationally known disability rights advocate. In 1998, she wrote a book called Beyond Ramps on Disabilities, published by Common Courage Press. Got good reviews from the likes of Alexander Coburn, Marcus Raskin. She was a nationally known figure. She had her demons. I and her daughter Georgia did our best to try and keep her with us and among us, but those demons got the better of her. So I'll say that in salute to Marta, and wherever she is. I'd sure like to be with her someday, even though I have trouble believing in an afterlife.
How to Survive the Loss of a Love. You ever hear of that book? Do you have it?
I don't have it, but I'm learning about that.
Apollos has used copies for about $5, and I've been prescribing it for years to buy people who are grieving. And I've seen the latest stuff, and none of them come as close as being the best as that one. For 50 years, it was the same one. And it's a suggestion, okay?
I'll keep it in mind, though.
Yeah, it's an easy read. So we better stop now because they're going to yell at me. Shall we have a PSA to Mr. E to watch my shows on the web? Google Don Bay on YouTube. There's hundreds of shows and interviews, almost as good as this interview tonight with Sam and Steve. And remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too, and you too, and you too, and you too, Mike, and you too, Bill, and you too, the whole.